Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. I have another incredible guest to welcome to you today. But before I do that, I would love to encourage you to go and follow us on your favorite podcast platform of choice. We rely on you for our marketing. We don't do any paid or performance or any other form of promotion for this podcast. You are our marketing division. We have a back catalog of over 450 episodes for you to enjoy, share, comment, and interact with us on. So go ahead and do that. We really appreciate it. It helps us reach a bigger audience and please the algo god. So we always appreciate the help. Now, without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Julian WALLIS from Intuji to the pod. Welcome, Julian.
Thanks for having us, Jason. Very excited for this and appreciate you having us on.
My absolute pleasure. Look, we've been connected for a little while on LinkedIn, and the way that I discovered you was some B2B content that you were putting out and talking about, and B2B e-commerce is something that's near and dear to my heart. It's something I've specialized in for a while now as part of my 24-year career in this wonderful world of e-commerce. But it seems like you also specialize in B2B and digital transformation, and you have your own agency based there in Western Australia in the great city of Perth. Tell us a little bit about how you came to be in this space. I've seen a few little clips where you were talking about, I think you were 16 or something like that when you first started building websites. You said you were pretty young when you first got into this game, weren't you?
Yeah, and I appreciate it. Yeah, basically Intuji started actually as Webo Designs back in the day. When I was 15 is when I first kicked it off. I started in school, and yeah, it was more of just a passion thing. I'd been building kind of websites, tinkering around with stuff with apps and that since I was like about 20. I built my first website. And yeah, it was just family and friends, if just getting some jobs here and there as I could. It was more of a fun thing, but I thought, hey, why not try and make it a bit more serious and make some money out of it? And so it was originally more focused on digital marketing and smaller kind of changes here and there. Wasn't niched down as we are today, right? It was just take what you can get, which is just what happens at the start of anything like that. And especially with my inexperience and age, it was also a contributor to it. So that's where it was. And we've gone through to where we are today to Intuji. And yeah, I guess I really feel that we've only essentially nailed our niche and what we do in the last real 6 months. And I've always had the vision for what we're doing now, but you've got to crawl before you walk. And so it takes a fair bit of time to get there.
Yeah, no question about that. And it feels as though, and this is just as an outsider looking in all transparency, you and I have never worked together. We've never worked on a joint project or have a joint client together. So this is just as an outsider looking in, consuming your content and being very appreciative of the push that you're giving to be e-commerce in particular in the ANZ region and some of the insights that you're giving and building in public and being very transparent and being pretty thought forward with your content, and now having your own podcast as well that you've been running for over a year, running Intuji now for over 9 years. You've obviously got a deep passion for this stuff, but when did you come to the realization that B2B e-commerce was a thing, it was going to be a thing, that it was potentially had, especially going forward, potentially had more growth opportunity, or that the industry itself was facing perhaps more challenges than the D2C and B2C world in many respects? When did it dawn on you that B2B, hey, maybe this thing really has some legs?
Yeah, I guess it wasn't necessarily a specific moment or whatever, but I've always been fascinated by tech in general and just the capabilities of it, and just tinkering around with it, whether it's games or apps or whatever. It's just like how, I don't know, it's just like there's so much opportunity there to make things great, right, and make things easier. And I got into early even building computers when I was really young and that kind of thing. So it's always just been a fascination, just anything that I around tech, I just love and enjoy. And so where the B2B side of it came in, I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by family and friends and businesses, etc., in that kind of space and more traditional industries, especially around B2B, and they've been successful businesses. And so I've been exposed to those things, but I guess I saw opportunities that were there for those businesses. So I was like, hey, if you could do this and this, there would be so much more, I guess, so much more you could do with the tech that was available than what they were doing. And I guess it's naivety as well, being young and you don't have that experience, and in one way it's good, but there's a lot of ways it's bad. But I guess you look at it and say, hey, I haven't really been in something for a long time. And typically, this isn't always the case, but especially with traditional industries or B2B in general, is that mostly it's been either family businesses or businesses that have been around for a long time, and those things, they haven't been disrupted. And so it does take an outside view, I guess, for someone to say, have you thought about doing something completely different? And so I guess that's where it meshed. It was like, I don't know, to me, it just makes sense. Why wouldn't you do it this way, right? There's just so much opportunity there. But then for those that have obviously had great success already, it is hard to change those things sometimes.
Yeah, and I guess it's the outside visionary that can come in and question the status quo, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, B2B historical businesses, and we're in a similar game. I don't own an agency in the sense that I don't do implementations anymore. I've run and built agencies in my past and worked brand side and had my own e-commerce pure play in the whole 9 yards, but I'm a pure consultancy now. But what I find really interesting, specifically now that I've dedicated my life to B2B now, is that the historical legacy B2B world, as you said, oftentimes these businesses, they're now being run by the children or the grandchildren of the founders. These B2B businesses, manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, they're oftentimes 50, 75, in some cases 100-year-old businesses. And so the way they've always done things has just been the way they've always done things. And so historically, the B2B world has been driven by relationships. It's been driven by field sales. It's been driven by inside sales. It's been driven by account managers. It's been driven by SDRs, knocking on doors, building relationships, taking people to the game, taking people to boozy lunches. It's been for lack of a better term, the good old boys club. And in many respects, some of the safety of B2B has been built on the idea of total monopolies. And by monopolies, exclusive distributorships, manufacturers manufacturing for a specific vertical, and maybe being only one or two or three manufacturers playing in that space. And some of these businesses, it's crazy. B2B businesses we've never even heard of doing 100, 200, 3, 4, $500 million a year in revenues, and have built that entire revenue stream on the back of relationships in the industry. But I feel like that is slowly coming to an end. And by that, Forrester has recently released research that shows that 71% of B2B buyers in the United States today are millennials or Gen Z. Now, that trend may not be exactly mirrored in ANZ just yet, but it's coming. And the reality is that a lot of the B2B buyers of today, they're aging out of the industry and they're being replaced by digital natives. And those digital natives don't want to do things the good old boy way, right? And in many cases, those aren't good old boy buyers anymore. They're females, they're minorities, they are digital natives. And as a result of that, they don't want to do things the way things have always been done. And they're shaking up the buy side, which means that the sell side has to adapt. And in many cases, that just isn't happening fast enough, is it?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And one thing I say is, and people can get defensive about it, and they say, oh, we are relationships, or we're this, or we're that, or we can't do this, we can't do that. And I would say for me, it's not about replacing that, right? It's about augmenting it. It's okay, what are you doing across all of your channels, including e-commerce, right? But what are you doing across all of your channels to deliver the best experience you possibly can within your industry? What are you doing? And I detest this B2C and B2B thing about there's different, you're dealing with humans, and I don't want to be cliche about it, but at the end of the day, how do you go, okay, my job is to make their life as fast and as easy as possible, essentially. Fast, not in a bad way, but fast in, okay, I just want to get things done. I want to know it's done properly. I just want to have self-service capability. I want to know what I want to know. I want to be able to order. I want this, just a great experience. And so that's what it should be. And it's not just about saying, oh, okay, you don't need to build relationships or whatever else. No, but use this to supplement that. Use that to give you the ability to add. It's an additional to your arsenal. And a lot of these teams are going out where we've had a client, I know for ourselves, specifically in the B2B space, and they had been told, we've had this multiple times, but just with this one client, that they would have 2 million more spent with them a year if they just implemented some certain things, right? And that was one client out of a large client. They were actually, their business was a large business, but it was one of their clients. And it's, can you not see the opportunity that's here? And I think that's one of the biggest things that's the problem, in my opinion, is they don't have the foresight. It's not necessarily their fault, but they've done things a certain way. They've done things for so many years and they've been successful. It's not about saying you're not successful, you're bad, or you're this. It's like saying, no, here's how we can leverage even more opportunity. So maybe you are going from, let's say, 100 million to you want to grow to 110 or whatever. But how do we go to 125 in that same time span? And that's what I guess it's about for me.
I think it also, to your point, is about how do we go from 100 million to 200 million without needing to double our sales force
100%.
at the same time. And to me, I'm with you. I am not a foe or an adversary of sales reps. I think sales reps are the greatest thing since freaking sliced bread. I'm all about how can we give sales reps superpowers, and how can we take away the pain of admin, which in my research and with the clients I work with, and for the merchants that measure the time spent by sales reps based on activity, anywhere from 20 to 60% of their activities are admin related, meaning they add no value to them. They don't increase their commission level, that it doesn't increase the customer experience or improve the customer experience at all. It's purely an admin function. And I don't know a salesperson on earth that likes administration. But I think one of the challenges that I see when I go in and I start consulting to these B2B sellers is that they get the incentivization structure all wrong straight out of the gate for them and for the customer. And as a result of that, they don't see high adoption rates. They don't see high ROI on their digital initiatives. They cut back commissions for all orders that come through digital channels instead of either incentivizing them equally with all channels, or where I've seen the best digital success is where they actually add additional incentives for all orders that come through digital channels. If you want high adopt, you get what you incent. With my friend Jason Hine from the industry is a fan of saying sales reps are coin operated, right?
Yeah.
You get what you incent with salespeople. And at the end of the day, if you give them the right incentive, they will make sure that their customers are onboarded into these more efficient channels that are not just more efficient for the business, but more efficient for the buyer as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And it's definitely not about replacing them, but use their knowledge as well, and the customer's knowledge, more importantly, to make this experience better, to make these channels better. There's such a lack of, just know it from sitting around boardrooms with teams and you're having discussions, and they're like, yeah, this is what we need to do. We know we've been in the industry for 30 years and customers want this, they don't want that, they don't want this. And it's just, you can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing. Like, you've been in it so long, and again, it's not about coming in and saying you're wrong and you're this and you're that. It's just like saying, okay, no, have you maybe considered a different approach? And by far the most successful teams that we see and work with are people that are just like, we are already dominating industry, but we want to dominate even more, right? Like, it's just constantly about looking for that continuous improvement. And where you get that knowledge is not one individual area or a stakeholder has the answer necessarily. It's okay, most importantly, and I feel this is the least researched area and time put into it, is the customers. Ironically, people default to assuming they know what they want when in fact they actually probably have no idea. And then they're not the only ones, but you've got your internal ones, such as your directors, you've got your sales people, you've got your admin people, all these other things. But once you start to know how to dig into and go, okay, what are we spending on time on this? And you go, oh, the admin team is spending 450 hours a month on just doing that specific thing combined. And it's like, well, why are we doing that? And I didn't even know that was the case. And it's like, yeah, because you haven't bothered to ask the questions. We haven't bothered to explore whether we can do things differently. And I guess that is super important. And I just feel, coming back to that the customer part of it with doing the research, is that's, in my opinion, one of the most overlooked parts. And it sounds easy, sounds cliche, but it just, the facts of it are, you ask a stakeholder when you sit down with them that, oh, we want to implement this specific feature, or we want to do this. And you're like, okay, why? Like, oh, because I know that we need to do it. It's like, why? Okay, what customer is it for? And they can't name someone. And it's, and I think that's where as you say, it's an interesting point you raise about incentivizing the adoption rates, which I agree with, absolutely. But also, I think so much of it is hurt in regards to the adoption and incentivization, because we build what we want to build and what's in the interest of us, rather than building what's actually in the interest of the customer.
Yeah, you raise a very good point there, which is when I go in and I first start working with a customer, one of the first questions I ask them is, what internal and external research have you done? What canvassing have you done? Have you asked any questions of your customers about e-commerce? Because what I find is that oftentimes customers don't use terms in the B2B world, they probably don't even use the word e-commerce. That word, the entire language set, the entire B2B dictionary doesn't really use the same terminology as D2C and B2C. So they'll use the term buyer portal or seller portal or trade portal, or they will understand words like e-procurement or punch out or EDI, or they'll use every term under the sun other than e-commerce. But what they actually are referring to is oftentimes a digital services layer that they have a default expectation will be made available by the seller that isn't available today. And so oftentimes when I'm asked by a seller to come in and do that work on their behalf, it could, because they sometimes just don't know how to even have those conversations with their customer cohorts. They don't know the questions to ask. They don't know the nuance to add to those questions. So they just ask questions like, hey, would you like us to do e-commerce? Hey, if we offered e-commerce, would you use it? And that's where the discussion ends. And unfortunately for those customers, especially the ones that have a great relationship with their sales rep, oftentimes if that's the only question you ask, they go, well, probably not, because I have a great relationship with Bob. I have a great relationship with Jane. I do all my business through them. I send them an email with my order, and they just put it into the system for me, and it just gets shipped. Well, I don't have a problem with that. I love working with those guys. But if you ask more nuanced questions than that, okay, cool. If you could continue to transact in the way that you do today, and you've got your relationship with Bob, you've got your relationship with Jane, that's great. But what about if you wanted to log in and explore information about a product? And you wanted to download a spec sheet, or you wanted to download an exploded drawing, or you wanted to check the inventory level of a specific item, or if you wanted to check your specific price on an item, or if you wanted to check the status of a shipment, or if you wanted to download a historic invoice, or if you wanted to lodge a return, or if you wanted to make a quote request, if you could self-service all that stuff yourself at any time of the day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at your convenience, would that be beneficial to you? Would being able to do those things on your own at your leisure, do you think that would make you more efficient? Would that be more helpful to you? Oh, yeah. Or if you contextualize it even further and you say, tell me one or two things that you absolutely love about doing business with the seller, and then tell me the one or two things that you absolutely hate about doing business with the seller. What are the painful things that are hard work for you today that make it more difficult and add friction for you buying from this seller today? And then, then the flood comes out. But if you just say, would you like us to do e-commerce? It's too broad and non-nuanced of a question to get a meaningful response from a customer, has been my experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And I'd add to that to say that there's two things that I would break it down into. Firstly is exactly what you've just said there, and totally agree with it. But okay, you've got to do the work to actually get that out of a customer. And as a third party, I know that we've extracted's the wrong word because it sounds wrong, but we've talked to customers and they've said things to us that they wouldn't have necessarily even shared with our client, because naturally they're just too scared.
They don't want to offend them, and they've got a working relationship with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's that part of it. But then, and you've just got to put in the work to know what questions to ask and how to put those things. And that's absolutely comes with experience. I think there's a second point to it that's often overlooked from my perspective as well, which isn't often talked about, which is a lot of the times customers don't know what they want. And what I mean by that is you've got to go to them with if you actually, without using innovation as a buzzword, right? Because it often is thrown around like that, but to be genuinely innovative and differentiate your brand, how a customer is going to know everything, how to do that, right? If that makes sense. So you need to go and start connecting those dots and saying, okay, here's what they've said they want, which is brilliant. We got that. And here's what the stakeholders want. Here's what this person wants, everything. I can now start connecting the dots and then start going, okay, we can do all of that, but what about if we did that and we did this, right? And what about if we did this and we did that? And again, some of those ideas will be terrible, probably most of them, but there'll be a few of them where it's like, oh, wow, we hadn't even thought that was a thing. Like, we didn't even think that was possible. If you can do that, then that's way better than what we discussed last week. Now we're talking, and now we're starting to get to that level of genuine innovation, things that have been not being done within the industry, and things that customers don't just come out and say, oh, we want to be able to see inventory levels. Yeah, great. Okay, that's good. Don't get me wrong, but it's par for the course. And if you aren't there already, then you're well behind, right? So
you're behind. You're way behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's okay. So how do we do all of that stuff and do it really well? But then where's the secret sauce as well, right? What are we doing where it's just, okay, I work with manufacturer X or Y or whoever it is, or wholesaler Y, because I just get this experience, and I don't even care paying more for it, whatever else. I just know, I just love it. It's just great. And I'm not going to move anywhere else because of that specific thing. And there's companies like that that are doing it. One of them, for me personally, I've said this a lot of times, but is Wise, the financial product. I've been using them since they were TransferWise over 8 years ago.
Me too.
Yeah. And
And as a digital nomad,
yeah,
couldn't live without them.
100%. And recently, I don't know why, but they've been getting a lot of hate on LinkedIn. I'm not sure why, but I've had some problems with them, but they've always been sorted out like incredibly well and fast. And so I don't know, maybe it's just my luck, but it's an incredible product to me. And that is a product that, to me at least, doesn't care who you are, what you're doing. It's just, it works, right? It works. I've got personal account, I've got multiple businesses accounts, and all of these, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't change. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. It's just great. And that is what you should be. That is what I will call, sorry, like true innovation, because you can go to other banking apps and achieve the same thing, but you don't get the same experience. It's not as easy, right? And so if you focus on just the feature, oh, we want to be able to do this, so we want to be able to do that, it's like, that's not the whole answer.
And I think us as technologists, we've made a little bit of a rod for our own back sometimes. And I've completely altered the way that I engage with most of these B2B sellers today. And when I do my deep dive discovery to understand where they're at, where they want to get to, etc., one of the first things we start discussing, and oftentimes this is the biggest gap in understanding from the seller side, is asking them, what type of experience do you want to create for the customer? What do you want them to feel when they engage with your business? What are the specific UVPs that you rate yourself on today, that you say, these are the 4 things that make us freaking awesome, that make us the best in the industry, that our customers absolutely rave about? How do we want them to feel that through every touch point, whether it's digital, physical, or otherwise? And what I find is, if they don't have a clear vision of that, then the tech doesn't matter. And I tell them, look, we have to get clear on what your vision is for customer experience first. Let people like me and other experts worry. The tech can be sorted out. The tech is there, right? We can, through custom development, through off-the-shelf platforms, through system integration, we can make almost anything happen today, right?
Yeah.
And pretty cost effectively today too. So don't worry about the tech, because oftentimes they launch in and one of their first questions to me is, how can we leverage AI? And how can we do all these things? And it's like, you're not even doing e-commerce today. Why don't we take a crawl, walk, run approach?
Yeah.
And why don't we work from the customer experience backwards instead of from the tech forwards? Because at the end of the day, the tech is just a tool,
Yeah.
right? And if it's not engineered and architected and delivered in a meaningful way for the customer, no matter how much you spend, you can go and spend $500,000 tomorrow, and it may see zero adoption by the customer, in which case it will be a failed project from my perspective. Even if technically the project is a success, we get launched, we get live, we get stable, but if it doesn't get used, both internally and externally, then what the hell was the point?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. And to add to that would be around just focusing on features over outcomes is just a terrible idea. And it's always going to end in failed adoptions, low adoptions, etc. And again, explaining that further to those listening is like, what's our North Star? Like, where are we trying to go? Actually, as you said, like the experience, what's our goal here? And let's start from, okay, we want to often use this as an example. Like, we want to have 80% of our admin or our orders or all of that digitized in the next 2 years, right? So all of it either processed or whatever it is. Okay, well, now we can work back from that. Don't start with, we want to build a new Shopify site, or we want to build a new Magento site, or whatever it is, or we want to build an e-commerce site, or we want to do this, or we want that. It's like, what's the outcome we're trying to achieve? Once we know that, then
and why?
Yeah,
I push a little bit harder. I say, that's great. You want to digitalize 80% of your orders, but what? And if the focus is solely how it's going to benefit me as a business in terms of efficiency, then again, that is likely to lead to a failed project with a failed outcome.
Yeah.
And so I think if we're not coaching our clients and helping our clients to be more customer centric, then I think we failed as consultants, to be perfectly honest.
Couldn't agree more.
Because if we're just trying to get a project in the door, and we're just trying to get a project out the door and delivered because that's how we pay our bills and that's how we keep our teams fed, then I think we failed. And I'd like to think that through my content and your content and people like us in the industry that genuinely care about the long-term viability of our industry, right? If we want to take a long-term view, we have to act with long-term thinking, and the long-term thinking always has to be customer-centric. And B2B businesses, I think by definition, they think they're automatically customer-centric because of all the manual touch points that are involved in the B2B world, right from the point where someone applies for a trade account to begin with, right? We in the B2B world, we know our customers way better than in the B2C and DTC world. We make all sorts of assumptions about customers in the B2C and DTC world. Oftentimes, they're totally unknown to us. And all the search, merch, and personalization technology in the B2C and DTC world is based on wisdom of the crowd technology. Oh, this cohort of customers took this behavior, which led to this outcome. So therefore, this new customer will probably fall into that same bucket, right? So there's a whole lot of crappy assumptions made in the B2C world that we don't need to make in the B2B world.
Yeah.
We know where our customer is. It's hard to onboard them. It's time consuming. It's costly. We invest so much into that personal relationship. And then all of a sudden, when we start to digitize our business, we throw that mindset out the door. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
No. Yeah. And to add to that as well, just focus on the customer experience, and just again, focus on the customer experience. Like it's so important. What do we want to do? And we just use the example of Wise that we just discussed as well. Like the difference is the experience. It's not the features. It's nothing else. Just, I know it's going to be so much greater. And there's one thing I've met, and we've worked with companies and spoken with companies doing over 250 million, right? Then it's like, the biggest thing, and every company says this, you don't have to be doing over 250 million. It's like, we are the best at customer service. We prioritize customer service. We are the greatest at this. We prioritize our customers. So great. Sorry, did you just tell me the only way I could place an order with you is by phoning you or emailing you? Okay, yes, when I ring you, I can get onto you and you answer within 3 rings, or you do this, which that's great. But why do I have to ring you? Okay, if I want to, yes, but what you're conveniently leaving out is that you are saying that that is the only choice that I have, right? And so don't get me wrong, when I do it, okay, yeah, I might get a good experience. But what about the hidden stuff that I don't see, right? When I want to go, okay, I want to do this late at night. I want to do this even not late at night. I just don't want to ring anyone. I just want to look up this specific thing, or I want to do that. Why do I have to email you? Why do I have to ring you? I want an instant answer, right? I just want to do it myself. And it's like, how can you not see this? And it's our job, as you say, to help them to see that and say, okay, there is significant opportunity here for you as a business. But at the same time, what I try and push is you can improve your efficiency and you can improve all this. At the same time, you can improve the experience. It doesn't have to be one or the other, right? It takes work, right? But if you get both of those, that's where the fire starts, right? That's where things start to really propel, because you as a business are getting great efficiency from it. But at the same time, the customers, this is so much better and this is awesome. And now we're starting to get more referrals. We're starting to land contracts because we're actually selling our experience. We're selling our USP. There's all of these different things come into play. And it's, oh, wow, this really does work, right?
And there's 2 massive evolutions in the B2B world that I have witnessed, especially since COVID, that I'd love to get your take on. The first is the dramatically increasing expectations of the buyer, even when they transact via EDI or punch out. So if they're doing procurement largely electronically, machine to machine, they still have this increased expectation that they can log into a self-service portal and do all sorts of other things other than the transaction. That's the first evolution of expectations. The second evolution of expectations is digital hybrid sales channels. So being able to check inventory, being able to place an order, being able to lodge an RMA through channels like WhatsApp, through Slack, through email, through all these digital hybrid channels, that they're not just sales channels, they're sales and service channels, and being able to look up inventory, being able to query a product, being able to place an order, being able to check the status of a shipment through these hybrid sales channels, right? And being able to integrate those channels into our core commerce platform or into our ERP system so that we can surface that information in a meaningful way to the customer through the channels that they already want to do those things through. Like, they're already using WhatsApp, they're already using Slack, they're already using email. And so if we can automate services through those channels to where they don't have to change, they don't have to modify the way they're already doing business today. So I think that instead of trying to encourage adoption of these completely novel ways of doing things. How about we try to support them in the way that they already are doing things and simply say, look, through digital technology and through system integrations, we can now leverage those channels that they're already using every single day in their businesses today with virtually zero barrier to adoption.
Yeah, no. So on your first point, I absolutely, with the EDI side of things and that, I've heard that before from clients that we've worked with as well. So even our biggest accounts, they use EDI already or whatever it is. Yeah, okay, that's one part of it. What else are you bringing to the table as value to entangle yourself, to get yourself embedded in them? It's not about trapping customers, but if you become so much part of their life, it's harder to move away, right? That's the facts of it. And it's not about, if you do that by providing a bad experience, then they're just going to leave anyway because they know it's a bad experience. So it's not about trapping them with a bad experience. Trap them with a great experience. Like, they don't want to go. And they're embedded, they're integrated, all these things, and they don't want to go. And so we do EDI, we do punch out. But you go to the portal, or even through the infrastructure that we've built, we can deliver you these reports, we can deliver you these insights, whatever it is. But they're not just generic and crap. They are actually relevant. They actually help me, and they take 5 hours off my work a week. That is the difference between a supplier that you want to work with and someone that you don't. And so absolutely on that. And then the second point, especially around on the customer facing side, I just think it's so important that we identify as a business what channels are our customers in. And as you said, WhatsApp, Slack, all these other ones, which is, I totally agree. But don't try and do everything as a business. That'll be one bit of my advice. Don't do every channel, but find out where the customers are and say, okay, yeah, let's do that. So we've built the infrastructure. Let's say we built the core in our portal or platform, if that's the way. And then suddenly, whether we're going headless with our architecture or whatever, we won't get technical here. We can build off of those things, right? We can build off the core of it, whether it's we've got a data warehouse, all of these kind of things. But we can build off that. We can build off our WhatsApp or any of these other things. It's okay. Again, it comes back to, it's not rocket science, it's the experience, right? It's just easier. Suddenly I can go, yeah, I did want to do it like that. And you've taken away 5 steps and taken away 15 minutes of my day. You've given me back 15 minutes of my day, and you're brilliant. And I'm happy to pay you like more, quite literally, because I know that you're brilliant with the infrastructure you provide. You're brilliant with the experience you provide. But then on top of that, this is where I would say the customer service does come in. If something goes wrong, you do have that brilliant customer service that you've always built and pride yourself on, you've built over the years. And I know that, hey, it's going to be sorted out, right? It's easy. That's, to me, where the sweet spot is.
Yeah, and look, I think one of the challenges that we have in the B2B world is product data. And one of the first things that I encounter, especially if I'm consulting to a brand that has never done e-commerce before, and in the B2B world, shockingly, for people that work in the B2C and DTC world, it's shocking to them to hear what percentage of B2B sellers have never done e-commerce and still don't do e-commerce today. It's still the lion's share. And it would be unthinkable in the B2C world or the retail world. It would be unthinkable to start a brand new brand and not do e-commerce. It's absolute table stakes. You just wouldn't do it. It would be commercial suicide. Even if you had a large physical store estate, it would be physical and financial suicide to not offer e-commerce. It is a default expectation. It is not yet a default expectation in the B2B world. And I know people like you and me are working really hard to make that not the case, but it is still the case. And one of the barriers to adoption that I see is probably one of the biggest and most challenging for these B2B brands to deal with is their product data. Because oftentimes it's spread across the business in the most weird and wonderful ways. It's on network drives, it's on sales reps' desktops, it's in printed catalogs, it's in PDFs. It's spread across the business, not only in the type of data, the formats of data, the structures of the data, unstructured data, file downloads, zip files. Product data is literally a disaster in many of these B2B businesses, and especially for wholesale distributors, because usually wholesale distributors, their catalog is not your typical maybe 50,000 SKU catalog like B2C. It's like 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 5 million SKUs. And when we start talking catalogs at scale like that, And when we have maybe Bob, the sales rep, or Jane, the sales rep, is the only person that knows about this category of products, and they know exactly where on the network drive to go and get this information and email it to a customer. It's about how do we digitalize that content in a meaningful way, get it associated with products in a meaningful way, and how do we have the technology in the business? Because oftentimes these B2B sellers, they go, I have an ERP. What else do I need? They've never heard of a PIM before. They've never heard of a DAM before. They've never heard about technology that allows them to bring consistency to their product data in such a way that it is actually ready to distribute via digital channels. Because usually when I go in and I say, give me a sample of 20 products from your catalog and show me what data you have around those products, and then show me a sample of 20 customers and the the customer data you hold about them. Show me the structure, right? Usually I can tell them, after I look at those two sets of data, I can tell them all the problems in their business, and it's almost like I've got a crystal ball, and it freaks them out. I know exactly where your problems are. And half the time my consulting is data cleansing, data architecture, data engineering, helping them get their data even into a fit state for digital channels to begin with. Do you experience that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Garbage in, garbage out, right? As in, you've got to have your data, right? I'm a big proponent of like single source of truth. Now, there may be like a source of truth for different data objects, such as your customers and your products. There may be, yes, you may layer things where obviously we might have some from the ERP and layer those things on with the PIM, with our product data and stuff. But like, we've got to have a source of truth, in my opinion, for each object as best we can. Now, as the bigger the business gets, the more complex it gets, but how do we consolidate systems as best we can? But absolutely had that experience like you've just described, where people have got things on drives, and then someone's like, oh yeah, some of that's managed in our current website, and then the other thing we do in an Excel sheet over here, and then the other thing, oh yeah, as you said, Bob, he does that one as well, and it's, who knows what's going on? There's no source of truth here. There's no master data that's where it's managed. There's even possibly conditional rules and that kind of thing around maintaining it, making sure it's consistent. And so it's so important, because it's the same thing with the customer data and everything else. To automate, we need to have structure, essentially. And if we don't have that structure, then how do we automate? Because we don't know what's what, essentially. And I'm massively oversimplifying here. But the idea of the fact is, we have to know what that structure is. We have to have it well planned out. That data has to be clean and well maintained. And it has to be, essentially, for each different piece of data, we need that source of truth where we can identify this is the master data, and we can pull and push from that, and we can do it in real time. And then obviously, as we get more complex, there are certainly layering, what I call layering, where we're just adding more and more information from different systems, mostly in the middleware or something like that there, where we essentially collate it. But at the end of the day, there's still a source of truth for every piece of data.
And it's interesting because sales reps sometimes think that the fact that they are the single font of knowledge, for example, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of tribal knowledge, right? There's a lot of institutional knowledge that resides in sales reps' heads, and oftentimes they think that is what gives them value, right? It's what makes them indispensable to the business, and it's what makes them indispensable to their customers. But what they don't realize is that is ultra high risk for them, and it's actually ultra high risk for the business.
Yeah.
Because what if Bob, who's the single font of knowledge, what happens if he gets hit by a bus? What happens if he retires? What happens if he goes to work for a competitor? He's taking away all of that tribal and institutional knowledge with him or with her or them when they leave the business. Or let's say a group of your internal sales reps decide to go and start a competing business to compete with you. The reality is this is highly concentrated risk inside of these businesses. And you cannot scale that knowledge until you get it out of their heads and into a system that is designed to be one-to-many. Because by definition, a human being is a one-to-one engagement. That's what it is. And sure, there is a value in the knowledge that these people hold in their head. But what I have found is that oftentimes these sales reps, they will be able to sell more because they can only have so many one-to-one conversations in a given day, in a given week, in a given month. They can only have so many of those conversations. So if they can scale those conversations by getting that data out of their head and into a meaningful one-to-many operation, then it means that all of their customers can access that information at the same time in the moment of consideration so that there is zero buying friction. And they actually end up selling more instead of having to go and comb a network drive for a piece of information to attach to an email and send to a customer on a one-to-one basis. And oftentimes they are literally days and sometimes weeks behind responding to queries in their email inbox simply because they do not have a one-to-many communication system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen it where with clients, we just see like one of the biggest holdbacks is scaling. And the biggest thing is there's just no systems there. There's no structure, and that knowledge is in the head. It's, oh, yeah, Jane is busy at the moment, and so it's really hard because she's been only doing this or something like that there. And it's like, well, okay, let's work together and get everyone focused on more higher value things. And like, how do we get this, as you say, in a one-to-many relationship, but in a meaningful way, structure it and set it up so we can repeat this. Like, we can repeat it. So an example is you sell to B2B, you sell to your wholesaler, you sell to distributors or whatever else. Okay, your current onboarding process, how do we make that done in quarter of the time in a way better experience with half the resource? Just making up these numbers. But the idea is that, at the moment we've got to send this form and we do this, and then it takes a week to get that back, and then we do this, and then when they want this price, they send us this request and something. And it's like, why? why does it doesn't have to be like that. You're the one choosing it to be like that. Even if you say you're not, it doesn't have to be. If you want to put the investment and time into it, you can change that. I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about this probably, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, a month ago, whenever it was. But an example of this was distributor prices. I still see this a lot where people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, on the organizing, designing, and printing of these catalogs and price lists. The irony of it is, I'm not saying they're completely useless or whatever. People have got their own reasons for them as well. But the irony of it is, to me, you make one pricing change, that whole thing is wrong. I've heard of people spelling their brand name wrong in these things when they've done a print run, right? Where it's, okay, you can say whatever, it doesn't matter, we're still a successful business. Yeah, absolutely. But how much more successful could you be? How much more could have you got out of it if you've gone, okay. And one of the arguments on that, not to get off on topic, but I think it's important as an example, is the argument often comes back as, yeah, but they want it. That's what they want. It's, no, they want that because you don't provide a better alternative. That's the problem.
Or because you trained them to want it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, if you gave them a better alternative and trained them, absolutely, but gave them that better alternative, and you make it easier so they know that there is no anxiety that the price may be wrong. But okay, not only do I see the price and the SKU, I see all of this other product information. I see real-time availability, and I know that with 99% accuracy, I know that's going to be on my doorstep in 2 days, right? Because why? Because it's just, I can see it all there in the portal, for example, if that's what it is. And so it's like, okay, now point to me why there's a benefit of that and why you're not investing. At least put it this way. If you are investing heavily in your digital on that side and your experience, and you're doing the catalog, then okay, if that's what you want to do, if you want to do it, that's great. But if you're saying, no, this is our route to market, this is what we're doing, and this is the only thing we're doing. You talked about it earlier. I referenced back to the digital natives, and I totally agree with you. There is now, it is happening here in ANZ, and I think happening globally, not just there in the States, but essentially there is, especially in the manufacturing and kind of the wholesale, the distribution, industrial services, those industries that we've talked about. Often they are large businesses with family businesses as well. You now have either second or third generation people my age that are coming and going, why I haven't met Gary. Haven't known him for 10 years. I'm now stepping in possibly to general manager or CEO or president, whatever it is, wherever you are. But why aren't we looking at other suppliers? Why don't we need someone that gives us API integration? We need someone that does this. And you've now suddenly, what you think you've been getting away with, you've been caught out very quickly. And it's not just hearsay. I've seen it happen in businesses where it's like businesses have lost massive contracts because they don't have these things in place. And then what they do is they run to implement it. They run to do it. And because they run and rush it, it's like they fail it. And then they go, oh yeah, we knew it was right the whole along. We shouldn't have done it. It was just a waste of time or whatever. And it's like, how do you win, right?
Of course, it was going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you rush it and you create a crap experience off the backside of it, Of course it was going to fail,
Yeah.
right? You never canvassed your customers. You never had those conversations. You never asked them what they actually wanted or needed. You never gave any nuance to those questions. You never asked them and said, look, if we can bring 1, 2, 3, 4% worth of efficiency to the buy side for you by making it more efficient for you, would that benefit your business? And the answer, especially in wholesale distribution, is hell yes, because the margins are so thin in wholesale distribution already that the reality is if they can claw back 1, 2, 3% worth of margins worth of efficiency from the buy side, oh my God, they will jump at that every single time because it can sometimes make the difference between selling a product at a profit and selling a product at a loss. And especially with the radical changes, and you pointed it out, one of the big problems with printed catalogs is changing price tiers, changing exchange rates, adding additional pricing groups to your customers as your customer list grows, customers moving from one pricing group to another as their buy rates increase or decrease over a given year. The reality is that static pricing is just no longer a given in the B2B world, even for a quarter, because oftentimes what they say is, oh, we print a new catalog every quarter. What is the likelihood that every single price and price tier across every single SKU in that 2 million SKU catalog is going to stay the same for an entire quarter? That is just, it's an impossibility in the rapidly changing world that we see today, even if you just take into account exchange rates.
Yeah. Going back to your point about about it failing, right? And on that, I want to say something specifically. I bet, and in the most instances of this case, it's like me, us, right? And again, you've gone out and done that. And I'm talking specifically about in response to losing a contract or a tender or something like that there in regards to this. But you've gone and done it and said, oh, we're losing out on all this. We need to do this and this. We, us. And don't get me wrong, like you need to focus on the business outcomes. I'm a big proponent of that. But you rush it and you don't focus on the experience, and it's all me, us, what do we do, we, and it's no wonder it's wrong, right? No wonder it's wrong. What are you doing when it comes back to the nuts and bolts of it to make the experience better, right? What are you doing? And we talked about the catalog example. When it's done properly and it's done right with the right team, the right investment and everything else, it will be a better experience. It will be better for the customer. They will have access to more information. They will have more predictability, reliability, all of these things. And then not only that, in a self-serving way, it gives you an ability to be a lot more efficient and everything else. But on top of that, it then opens up, which a lot of the time it isn't talked about, a world of opportunities for you to deliver even more value. What value can you deliver through a catalog? Okay, once they've got it, they've got the catalog. Great. Okay, suddenly you've got the portal open with all of this availability with their pricing tier. You've got these real-time orders. You've got the stock value, all of these different metrics. In real time, you've got this data there. Suddenly, very specific promotions for that customer only to incentivize further spend, but also give a bit of a win. Hey, you've done this for this month. We want to reward you. Here it is. And even things like I've seen some companies do this, but very few, but like reward stores, again, for loyalty. Now, don't make it generic, make it worthwhile, right? Make it actually something that they like. Hey, they appreciate what we do. This isn't just a scheme, right, to try and stuff us around. It's genuinely worth it. And it's not about giving away 15% of your margins. That's not my point, but it's like, again, I sound like a broken record, but the experience, what is it? Like, what are you actually doing? And if you structure your data in this way, if you implement this technology, not just the technology, but if you do it, it opens up not only a world of possibility for your efficiencies, but you can do like way more for your customers as well to even further that experience that you would never have had the opportunity to do before.
And I think one final thing, and as we come down to the end of our time together, this has just been a fabulous discussion. I really appreciate your time. You're clearly knowledgeable. You've clearly been doing this for a long time. You clearly get the customer experience aspects of what we're talking about. DC360 says that by the end of 2024, this year, that there will be likely over 1,000 B2B specific marketplaces in the world, right? Marketplaces, DC360 data, Forrester data, Gartner data, just about everybody's data out there shows that marketplaces for B2B are still, and have been for the last few years, the fastest growing single sales channel available to B2B sellers today. So very similar to what we're seeing in the growth rates in marketplaces for the B2C world, we're seeing similar growth rates in the B2B world. And so a lot of these B2B sellers, they're becoming their own marketplaces, right? They're becoming a hybrid sales channel. They're doing direct sales, and then they're also doing effectively marketplace sales to expand and create an endless aisle and a much broader catalog set than what they could ever carry themselves or even sell through dropship scenario. What are your thoughts about marketplaces? Because I'm working with a client right now, one of the largest industrial belt manufacturers in the entire United States. Over 35% of their revenue today comes from Amazon Business. B2B marketplace sales, right? If Amazon went away tomorrow, they would take a serious hit to their bottom line. Now, in everything they do today, and one of the aspects of digitalization that we're going through with them right now is how to automate and integrate their ERP with Amazon, because Amazon is selling 1P on their behalf. So effectively, they're working through Vendor Central, not Seller Central, and they have no automation today. The amount of people that they have working dedicated on just Amazon sales is phenomenal, right? Because of course, if you drop the ball on Amazon 1P sales, you will not be an Amazon 1P seller for very long.
Yeah.
Amazon sets a very high bar when they sell your products directly under their brand. And one of the things that we're bringing to the table is through this automation, through setting up the transactional portal for the other 65% of your business, and also by bringing in an iPaaS system that we need to integrate all your other systems together anyway, we now have an opportunity to automate like 95% of the effort that you're doing manually in your work with Amazon today. Now, that is going to be a phenomenal time saver to their business, and it is going to decrease the risk that they will screw up their relationship with Amazon so that they will have a much longer term relationship with Amazon as a result. So I think it's not only reducing costs, but I think it's reducing risk, channel risk, and being able to lose a significant channel by implementing these technologies. So what is your take on the growth of marketplaces, but more importantly, being able to de-risk your business by being able to be much more omni-channel, by having a much more omni-channel view of the world?
Yeah. I've got a couple of points on it. One is with specifically selling through marketplaces is obviously that depends on businesses, right? Some businesses are prepared to do it. Others aren't prepared to put their brand reputation on the line, or they want to control of that, which is understandable. And I guess that comes down to the specific business. Is there growth to be had there? Absolutely. There's growth to be had, but it aligns with some businesses, others maybe not. Now, that's not really our conversation. Now, if you want to do it, you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. That's really your own choice as a business. But is there significant growth opportunity? Absolutely. Now, on the de-risking part, couldn't agree more. And on that, I think the same thing applies across the business. How do you automate so like you don't drop the ball with customers in general, right? How do you automate? Yeah, same thing with Amazon. Like you don't drop the ball with your suppliers or your actual vendors or your marketplaces like that. How are you implementing these things that are de-risking across the board? And again, there's absolutely multiple parts to it. You've got this efficiency gains, you've got happier marketplaces, happier customers, all of these things because you're not dropping the ball, right? So suddenly everyone's happier and you're de-risking, right? You're at less of a risk. Now, I suppose one of the risks, coming back to the first point, is if that amount of sales for a B2B business is coming through that one platform, no matter how you look at it, you are at a risk from a sales perspective, because if they do disappear overnight or they ban you overnight, we've had large clients have issues, for example, with Shopify. And the facts of it are, yes, Shopify is a great platform. Sometimes it fits into certain scenarios, sometimes it doesn't, whatever else. But no matter how, it doesn't matter how you spin it, you are at their mercy. And it's the same kind of thing, right? I guess it's not the exact same thing in regards to marketplaces, but there is a risk there in that fact that you can't control. And that's why if as a business you've got to analyze that and say, okay, that's not what we want to do. But I think it's important you go, okay, how do we create an experience so good that no matter what, they come to us, right? So whether it's through Amazon or it's through something else or whatever else, we've built that brand, we've built that differentiation, we've built, again, the knowledge, the referrals, everything else, to where we're not beholden to some company or some platform, and we've de-risked that. Now, at the end of the day, just clarifying my thoughts, I'm not saying Shopify is terrible and you shouldn't be on it, but the facts of it are a lot of people like to gloss over it. It is a risk, and it's just those things. I guess you weigh it up. It depends on every business, and I think it's a very interesting conversation.
Love it. Listen, mate, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile, your website in the show notes. But other than that, if people want to have a chat with you about B2B commerce, if they want to have a chat about basically de-risking their business and digital transformation and all the opportunity for their business, not only to make themselves more efficient, but to make themselves more sticky and beneficial to their customers, what's the best way for people to reach out and get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, firstly, I appreciate you having me on, and it's been a wonderful chat. I've learned a lot from you, so I really appreciate it, and it's been great. Been really looking forward to it, and it absolutely lived up to it. Yeah, if you want to check me out, I'm obviously on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Julian Wallis, you'll find us there. You can go to Intuji.com as well, and you can search Pulse by Intuji on YouTube. Essentially, they're the three key places you can find us, and if you want to reach out to us, you'll easily find your way to us from there.
Love it. Absolutely amazing. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you, get to let you ask me one question. Any question you like, can be personal or professional. Mr. Julian Wallis from Intuji, what is your question for me today?
Okay, that's great. I love that. I've just got to give myself a bit of time. I've got to make sure this is worth it and make sure that I don't
That's why I love
waste
putting
this.
my guests on the spot for them.
That's good. It's good. I really like that. I guess it would be without being cliche, what is one thing you would say that B2B leaders, I don't want to say companies, that you say as leaders get wrong or fail to see from your experience?
Yeah, it's an almost myopic internal focus. So when I go in, I would say 95% of the time or greater, when customers first come to me, their number one question is, how can we do things faster, better, more efficient for us? How can we make better margin? How can we cut costs? An almost totally myopic internal focused. How can we cut costs on sales reps? How can we? And it just breaks my heart because I think that it's starting from the wrong premise. Not only is it the whole, you're almost setting yourself up for total failure if that is the sole lens that you are looking at your business through at all times. Especially, I find that as economies contract, that's when businesses become even more internally focused, become even more myopic, when in actuality they should resist that urge and that they should actually be more outward facing. They should be more customer focused, and they should be thinking about ways they can, because the challenge is when the economy is contracting and they're finding their business challenging, their customers are equally finding their businesses more challenging. So if you can say, look, let's put our needs to the side for the moment. We will have plenty of time to think about that, but let's think about our customers. If we're in pain, then our customers are also in pain. So if we can take advantage of that pain and we can take away some of that pain for them, we will become so invaluable to them that it will make this whole thing so much easier. We'll have more funding to do these projects right. It will see greater uptake. We'll see greater ROI, faster time to value. I just think that businesses, for all the talk and bluster about customer centricity, like people like to throw that buzzword around, we're customer centric, but I know when I get behind the scenes of these businesses and I'm in discovery, I know what questions I'm getting asked by these brands. And the questions aren't about how can we make this better for the customer? How can we make this more seamless? How can we serve them across any channel that they want to do? But it's how can we get out from under this burden of manual transaction cost, for example. And I just think it's the wrong lens to start from, because you will have time to think about the benefits to you. You will have that time, but we have to start from a place that is truly customer centric. And that starts with actually having a conversation with the customers. And when I take on a new client, if they haven't had conversations with the customer, I say, that's where we're going to start, because it has to start there. Because I don't want to architect a solution that ultimately sees no uptake. That's the most depressing thing in the entire world. I want to see massive uptake of any solution I architect. And so it has to start with those discussions with the customer first.
Here, fail to focus on the customer and set yourself up to fail. It's just,
No
it
question.
rings absolutely true. That's great advice. So I appreciate it.
Julian, thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to speak to you again soon, my friend.
Thanks, Jason.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.